The smallest puppy ever seen was about to be put down. When the vet saw its collar, everything changed. Because this wasn't just a stray fighting for life. This tiny, broken body carried a secret worth millions, and a name the world hadn't spoken in 8 years. Under the dirt and blood. A collar engraved with 2 words. Property of L. Anders. The same Anders who vanished after tragedy, taking his empire and his grief with him. But here's the twist. Someone else knew, and they'd do anything to take what this puppy represents. Now a young vet faces an impossible choice. Break every rule to save one fragile life, or lose everything she's ever worked for. Because this isn't just about a dog anymore. It's about love, guilt, and a secret powerful enough to destroy them both. The real question? When the truth comes crashing in, who will she save first, the puppy or herself? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the empty waiting room as Mia Hale stood behind the front desk, her shoulders heavy with exhaustion. The day's files lay scattered before her, each representing another animal she'd helped, or tried to help. Outside, the rain created a steady rhythm against the windows, matching the quiet hum of the lights above. She rubbed her tired eyes, the words on the intake forms beginning to blur. The cleaning crew's vacuum whirred in the background, a familiar end-of-day sound that usually signaled time to go home. But paperwork waited for no one, especially not at a clinic running on thin margins. The front door burst open, letting in a gust of wet air and the sharp smell of rain. A uniformed animal control officer hurried in, cradling something small wrapped in a dirty towel. Water dripped from his jacket onto the freshly mopped floor. "Sorry to come in so late," he said, his voice gruff with urgency. "Found this one behind the dumpsters at Mason Street. Barely breathing." Mia's exhaustion vanished as professional instincts took over. She hurried around the desk, taking the bundle from his arms. The towel was soaked and cold, and through it she could feel a tiny body trembling. "Exam room 2, she directed, already moving. Under the brighter exam room lights, she carefully unwrapped the towel. Her heart sank at what she found. The puppy was barely more than skin and bones, its fur matted with dirt and what looked like oil. Its eyes, crusty and half-closed, showed signs of infection. Each breath came as a ragged wheeze, the small chest struggling to rise and fall. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, grabbing her stethoscope. The puppy didn't even flinch at the cold metal against its chest. The heartbeat was weak, but rapid. Too rapid. Working quickly, she checked vital signs and performed a gentle examination. The puppy's front leg hung at an awkward angle, clearly broken. The skin felt cold and clammy under her fingers, and she could count every rib. "How long was it out there?" she asked the officer who stood watching from the doorway. "No idea. Got a call about whimpering behind the restaurant. Could have been there all day, maybe longer." Mia's trained eye took in every detail, and none of it was good. Severe malnourishment had weakened the immune system. The labored breathing suggested pneumonia, probably from exposure. The broken leg would require surgery, but in this condition, anesthesia would be extremely risky. The officer cleared his throat. "Look, I need to file my report. What's the prognosis?" Mia kept her voice clinical, professional. "Multiple severe conditions, without intensive care, antibiotics, IV fluids, surgery, round-the-clock monitoring, survival chances are less than 10%. She swallowed hard. "And we don't have the resources for that level of care." "Then maybe it's kinder to end it now," the officer said, pulling out his paperwork. "Save it from suffering." The words hit her like a physical blow, but she couldn't argue with the logic. Their clinic survived on donations and careful budgeting. They simply couldn't afford the kind of care this puppy needed. With heavy steps, Mia went to the cabinet where they kept the euthanasia supplies. Her hands moved automatically, gathering the materials while her mind screamed at the unfairness of it all. Such a tiny life, never given a real chance. She prepared the syringe, her movements slow and reluctant. The puppy hadn't moved, hadn't made a sound. Only the shallow rise and fall of its chest showed it was still fighting to live. As she reached for the alcohol wipes, something caught her eye. Beneath the matted fur around the puppy's neck, a hint of leather peeked through. Frowning, she gently brushed aside the dirty fur. It was a collar, expensive leather, though scuffed and weathered. Most strays wore cheap nylon, if anything at all. This was the kind of collar that cost more than what she made in a day. Squinting under the harsh lights, she could just make out engraved letters on a small metal plate. Her lips moved as she read the fading words, "Property of L. Anders." The syringe forgotten in her hand, Mia stared at the collar. The name tugged at her memory, stirring up headlines she'd seen, stories she'd heard. L. Anders. It couldn't be the same person. It was impossible. She looked down at the tiny puppy, still fighting for each breath, then back at the collar that cost more than her monthly rent. "What's your story?" she whispered, her mind racing with questions. The night settled into an eerie quiet as the rain tapered off, leaving only the soft whir of medical equipment in the darkened clinic. Mia sat at her desk, her face lit by the blue glow of her laptop screen. Beside her, the tiny puppy lay curled on a heated pad, its breathing still labored but steady under the oxygen mask she'd rigged up from supplies meant for larger animals. The rise and fall of its tiny chest made her hold her own breath sometimes, watching for any change in rhythm that might signal trouble. She glanced at the worn leather collar in her hand, running her thumb over the faded material that had once been rich and supple. The craftsmanship was obvious even now. This hadn't come from a pet store shelf. Turning back to her computer, her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before typing, L. Anders. The search results flooded her screen instantly, washing her face in digital blue light. Headlines from 8 years ago jumped out at her like accusations. Tech giant Leonard Anders withdraws from public life after tragedy. Anders Corp stock plummets following CEO's disappearance. Grace Anders, 16, killed in late-night collision. Funeral for tech mogul's daughter draws hundreds while father remains unseen. Mia clicked through article after article, her coffee growing cold beside her as she pieced together the story. Leonard Anders had been a titan of the tech industry, known for his ruthless business strategies and innovative vision that had revolutionized mobile communications. Photos showed a tall man with piercing eyes and a confident stance, always in impeccable suits. But everything changed when his only daughter, Grace, died in a car accident on a rainy night, much like this one. Within weeks, he'd vanished from public view, triggering rumors of mental breakdown and bankruptcy that rocked Wall Street for months. "Your collar belonged to someone important," she murmured to the puppy, who responded with a weak thump of its tail against the padding. The gesture, small as it was, made her heart squeeze with a mixture of hope and worry. Someone who disappeared after losing what mattered most. Under the desk lamp's gentle light, she examined the collar more closely, turning it over in her hands. Her fingers found a slight ridge in the leather lining, unusual enough to make her pause. She carefully pulled it back, revealing a hidden compartment. There, engraved in tiny letters on a metal plate, was a phone number. Not an ID tag, as she'd expected, but something more personal, more secretive. Mia's stomach churned as she considered her options. Calling the number meant risking her job. The clinic had strict policies about after-hours care and unauthorized treatment for non-emergency cases. Dr. Marshall would have a fit if he knew she'd given medication without proper paperwork. If this really connected to Leonard Anders, she could be inviting legal trouble or worse. The man was known for his temper even before his daughter's death, and who knew what 8 years of isolation had done to him. But looking at the puppy's fragile form, the way its ribs showed through patchy fur and how it struggled for each breath, she knew she couldn't just ignore this lead. Whatever this dog's connection to the Anders family, it might be the only chance for the specialized care it desperately needed. Care that would cost far more than the clinic's charity cases fund could cover. With trembling fingers, she dialed the number on her cell phone. Each ring echoed in the quiet room, stretching on and on until she was sure no one would answer. The sound seemed to fill the small office, making her heart race with each unanswered tone. Finally, there was a click, followed by a generic voicemail greeting with no name attached. Mia cleared her throat. "Hello, this is Dr. Mia Hale from City Central Veterinary Clinic. I believe I found a dog linked to your family." She paused, choosing her words carefully, afraid of saying too much or too little. "It's in bad shape, but fighting hard. Please call back at this number as soon as possible." After hanging up, exhaustion hit her like a wave, making her shoulders slump and her eyes burn. She checked the time, nearly midnight. The puppy needed another dose of antibiotics. Policy or no policy? She prepared the injection with practiced hands, measuring the tiny amount with careful precision. "You're quite the mystery," she said softly, administering the medicine through the IV line she'd placed in its front leg. "But you're also a fighter, aren't you?" The puppy's eyes, though glazed with fever, fixed on her face with an intensity that felt almost human. "Stay with me, little fighter. Someone out there might be missing you terribly." She arranged a makeshift bed in one of the recovery kennels, lining it with extra blankets and making sure the heating pad was secure and the oxygen line clear. She checked the temperature twice, adjusted the drip rate on the IV, and made notes on a clipboard she hung from the door. As she draped a soft blanket over the kennel door to block drafts, her phone buzzed loudly against the metal counter. The sound made her jump, sending her heart into her throat. An unlisted number flashed on the screen, the bright display cutting through the dim room. Mia's hand shook as she picked up the phone, her palm suddenly slick with sweat. "Hello," she answered, trying to keep her voice steady and professional despite the late hour and her growing anxiety. The line crackled with silence for a long moment, nothing but static and the faint sound of breathing. Then a deep male voice, sharp with suspicion and an edge of something that might have been pain, demanded, "Who are you, and why do you have that collar?" Sunlight crept through the clinic's windows, casting long shadows across the linoleum floor. Mia's neck ached from her restless night on the worn waiting room couch. She stretched, wincing at the stiffness in her muscles, then immediately went to check on her tiny patient. The puppy had made it through the night, though its condition remained touch and go. Its breathing was still shallow and raspy under the oxygen mask, but the eyes that met hers seemed a shade brighter than before. "Good morning, little fighter," she whispered, carefully checking the IV line. That voice from last night's phone call echoed in her mind, deep, authoritative, with an undercurrent of barely contained emotion. She hadn't slept much after hanging up, turning the brief conversation over and over in her thoughts. The electronic chime of the front door startled her from her morning checkup. Through the glass, she watched a black SUV pull up to the curb with silent precision. The vehicle gleamed in the morning light, its windows tinted to perfect opacity. The back door opened, and Leonard Anders emerged. Mia's breath caught. She'd seen his photos in last night's articles, but they didn't prepare her for the reality. He was tall, probably in his early 60s, wearing an expertly tailored charcoal suit that somehow emphasized rather than hidden the rigid tension in his frame. His silver hair was perfectly groomed, his shoes gleamed, yet something about him suggested abandonment, like an abandoned mansion kept spotless by servants but empty of life. His face bore the same harsh beauty as his old magazine covers, though now it was carved deeper by grief and isolation. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and lines of suffering bracketed his mouth. He entered without hesitation, his shoes clicking against the floor with measured precision. His gaze swept the clinic methodically until it found Mia. Their eyes locked, and she felt the weight of his assessment, cold, calculating, used to measuring people's worth in seconds. Then his attention shifted to the puppy in its oxygen chamber, and everything about him changed. He stopped dead. The rigid control in his posture cracked. His hands resting at his sides trembled slightly before curling into fists. "The collar." His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. Is it wearing the collar? Mia retrieved it from her desk, holding it out. Yes, it's how I found your number. Leonard Anders took the collar with reverence, his fingers tracing the worn leather. This belonged to Daisy, he said, each word precise and clipped. My daughter Grace's dog. She lived on my estate, away from everything. She died 3 months ago. His jaw worked for a moment. There must have been puppies before. He set the collar down and straightened, his businessman's mask sliding back into place. I'll take it now. Name your price for whatever treatment you've provided. Mr. Anders, Mia said carefully, this puppy is in critical condition. Moving it right now could be fatal. It needs constant monitoring, oxygen support. It's mine. He pulled out a leather checkbook. Whatever the cost, I'll triple it. But that dog leaves with me today. Mia stepped between him and the oxygen chamber. I'm sorry, but I can't in good conscience release a critical patient. It would violate every medical ethic I have. Money isn't the issue here. Color rose in Leonard's face. She could see the struggle playing across his features. A man accustomed to solving every problem with wealth and power, suddenly facing something he couldn't simply buy. They stood there, locked in silent confrontation across the exam table, with the puppy's soft whimpers filling the space between them. Two immovable forces, both believing they knew what was best. Finally, Mia spoke softly but firmly. If you want it to live, let me try. Here, my way. Leonard Anders stared at her for a long moment. Something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or respect. Then, without a word, he turned and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he paused. Call me if it dies, he said, and was gone. The door slammed with finality, leaving Mia alone with the sound of her heartbeat and the puppy's labored breathing. Her hands were shaking, but her resolve was ironclad. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the clinic windows as Sarah, the clinic manager, stood over Mia's desk with her arms crossed. Her face was pinched with disapproval, making the wrinkles around her mouth deeper than usual. Unauthorized overnight stays, unapproved use of emergency supplies. Do you have any idea how many protocols you've violated? Sarah's voice carried the sharp edge of bureaucratic authority. Mia sat with her head in her hands, her dark hair falling forward to hide her expression. The puppy's oxygen chamber hummed softly in the background, a constant reminder of what was at stake. The paperwork clearly indicated euthanasia. You were supposed to follow procedure. Sarah tapped her clipboard against the desk. This isn't a charity, Mia. We have overhead costs, liability concerns. It was critical. Mia interrupted, lifting her head. We took an oath to save lives when we can. And sometimes we have to make hard decisions. Sarah's voice softened slightly, but her resolve didn't waver. I want that puppy euthanized before the end of the day. That's not a request. Mia nodded slowly, her mind already racing ahead to what she'd need. Portable oxygen, IV supplies, antibiotics. I understand. I'll take care of it. Sarah's shoulders relaxed slightly. Good. I'll need the paperwork on my desk in the morning. She turned and walked out, her sensible shoes clicking against the floor. As soon as Sarah was gone, Mia began gathering supplies. She worked quickly but carefully, sliding medications and equipment into her large tote bag between legitimate patient visits. Her hands trembled slightly, but her movements were precise, the same steadiness she maintained during difficult surgeries. The day crawled by until finally the last client left and the cleaning crew finished their rounds. Mia waited until the parking lot emptied before making her move. She wrapped the puppy in a soft blanket, keeping the portable oxygen flowing, and nestled it gently in her tote bag. Her heart pounded as she carried her precious cargo through the dark clinic. Every shadow seemed to hide Sarah's disapproving face. But she made it to her car without incident, settling the bag carefully in the passenger seat. The city lights blurred past as she drove home, stealing glances at the bag whenever she stopped at traffic lights. The puppy hadn't made a sound, and each moment of silence sent fear shooting through her chest. Her apartment was small but neat, with warm yellow walls and scattered houseplants. She cleared space on her coffee table, creating a makeshift intensive care unit with heating pads and IV poles fashioned from coat hangers. The puppy's breathing remained shallow and labored as she hooked up the fluids and antibiotics. Her phone rang just as she was adjusting the oxygen flow. Ethan's name flashed on the screen, making her stomach clench. She answered, already knowing what was coming. "Hey, sis!" His voice carried that false cheerfulness she'd grown to dread. "I hate to ask, but I'm a little short on cash for school supplies." Mia closed her eyes, hearing the lie in his words. "Ethan, we both know that's not what it's for." "Come on, Mia. I'm really trying here. Just a little help?" His tone shifted to that wounded little brother voice that used to work so well. "I can't. Not this time." The words felt like stones in her throat. "I love you, but I can't keep enabling—" He hung up before she could finish. Mia stared at the dark phone screen, guilt churning in her stomach. She'd spent years trying to save Ethan from himself, draining her savings, her energy, her hope. The puppy wheezed softly, drawing her attention back. She hadn't even thought about dinner, though it was well past 9. Instead, she sat cross-legged beside the makeshift ICU, monitoring vital signs and adjusting medications. Rain began to fall outside, pattering against the windows in an irregular rhythm. Exhaustion pulled at her limbs as the adrenaline of the day faded. She curled up on the floor next to the coffee table, one hand resting near the puppy's blanket. "You're not dying tonight," she whispered, her voice fierce despite her fatigue. "Not on my watch." Her phone vibrated, displaying an unknown number. The message was brief but clear. "This is Leonard Anders. I expect updates. Every day." Morning sunlight crept through the dusty blinds of Mia's small apartment, painting stripes across her face. She stirred on the hardwood floor, her muscles protesting from the awkward sleeping position. The buzzing of her phone pulled her from the fog of exhaustion. Through bleary eyes, she read Leonard Anders' text. "Update." Her heart jumped as she quickly turned to check the makeshift ICU on her coffee table. The tiny puppy lay wrapped in blankets, its chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Its body trembled slightly with each inhale, but it was alive. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by a wave of panic. Sarah would be at the clinic by now, discovering the missing puppy and supplies. Mia's fingers shook as she typed a brief response to Leonard. "Alive. Critical." The phone rang almost instantly, Leonard's number lighting up the screen. She answered, trying to keep her voice steady despite her stiff neck and growing anxiety. "What's the prognosis?" His tone was sharp, demanding, the voice of someone used to getting immediate answers. Mia shifted to sit cross-legged, running a hand through her tangled hair. "The pneumonia is severe. I've got him on oxygen support and antibiotics, but his temperature is unstable. The next 48 hours are crucial. And you're treating him in your apartment." Leonard's voice hardened with disapproval. "That's unacceptable. I'll send my people with proper equipment." "No!" Mia cut him off firmly. "This isn't a negotiation. Any movement or stress right now could kill him. He needs constant, careful monitoring, which is exactly what he's getting." The silence that followed felt heavy with judgment. She could almost picture Leonard's face, the same stern expression he'd worn in the clinic, used to commanding rather than compromising. Finally he spoke, each word seeming to cost him. "Do whatever it takes. Spare no expense. Just keep it alive." Before Mia could respond, a knock at her door made her jump. Through the peephole, she saw Ethan's familiar, slouched posture. Her heart sank as she opened the door. The smell of stale cigarettes wafted in with him. His usually handsome face looked drawn, dark circles under his eyes matching the scuffs on his worn jacket. "Hey, sis," he said, trying for a casual smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Ethan, this isn't a good time." Mia started, but he was already wandering into her living room, his gaze catching on the medical supplies scattered across her coffee table. He He picked up one of the medication vials, whistling low. "Finally treating yourself like royalty? This stuff isn't cheap." His attempt at humor couldn't mask the calculating look in his eyes. "Put that down," Mia snapped, snatching the vial from his hands. "You need to leave. Now. Come on, I just got here." He flopped onto a couch, too close to the puppy's setup. "What's with all the—" "Out!" Mia grabbed his arm, surprising them both with her forcefulness. "I mean it, Ethan. I can't do this right now." She practically pushed him through the doorway, closing it firmly on his hurt expression. Her hands trembled as she turned the deadbolt. That evening, Mia sat cross-legged beside the coffee table, carefully drawing a specially mixed formula into a syringe. The puppy lay still except for its labored breathing, but as she gently squeezed drops of the mixture onto its tongue, its eyes flickered open for the first time since the clinic. "There you are," she whispered, her heart lifting at this tiny sign of improvement. Her phone buzzed beside her. The new message contained a photo. Wrought iron gates rising imposingly against a manicured landscape, the kind of entrance that suggested old money and carefully guarded secrets. Below it, Leonard's message read, "When this is over, we need to talk." Mia stared at the image of those fortress-like gates, her stomach tightening with unease. The early morning sun had barely crested the city skyline when Mia pulled into the clinic's parking lot. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white. The adrenaline coursing through her veins masked the bone-deep exhaustion from another sleepless night watching over the puppy. She straightened her wrinkled scrubs and pulled on her lab coat, hoping it would shield her like armor. The weight of guilt pressed down on her shoulders as she thought about the supplies hidden in her apartment. Taking a deep breath, she pushed through the clinic's front door. Sarah, her manager, stood at the reception desk with arms crossed and lips pressed into a thin line. "My office. Now." Mia's stomach dropped, but she followed Sarah down the hallway, past examining rooms where the day shift was just beginning their rounds. The office felt smaller than usual, Sarah's disapproving presence filling the cramped space. "We have some concerning issues to discuss," Sarah began, shuffling through papers on her desk. "There are discrepancies in our inventory that need explaining, and Mrs. Peterson called this morning, very upset about her appointment being rescheduled without notice." Mia's throat went dry. She hadn't even thought about her scheduled appointments when she'd taken the puppy home. "I can explain." "Can you?" Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Because right now, I'm seeing red flags everywhere I look." The morning dragged on, each minute feeling like an hour as Mia tried to focus on her patients while carrying the weight of her deception. By lunch, her nerves were frayed raw. She escaped to the small courtyard behind the clinic, sinking onto a concrete bench. The autumn air felt cool against her flushed face. Her phone buzzed. Leonard Anders again. "Dr. Hale." His voice came through clear and businesslike. "I've been considering our situation. I'm prepared to make a substantial donation to your clinic. Enough to cover any inconveniences this may have caused. All I ask is discretion." The offer hung in the air between them. Mia's fingers clenched around her phone as anger flared in her chest. "I'm not covering for myself with your money. Everything has a price, Doctor Hale. Even principles." His tone carried the casual certainty of someone used to buying their way out of problems. Mia ended the call without responding, her hands shaking with a mixture of fury and fear. That evening, back in her apartment, Mia was checking the puppy's vitals when a weak whimper broke the silence. The sound sent ice through her veins. The pup's injured leg had swollen significantly, the skin hot to the touch. Red streaks spread outward from the wound, infection setting in fast. "No, no, no," she muttered, gathering supplies with trembling hands. But she knew the truth. The puppy needed surgery, proper equipment, sterile conditions, things she couldn't provide alone in her living room. For hours, she paced her apartment, watching the infection spread while pride wrestled with necessity. Finally, at nearly midnight, she picked up her phone. Leonard answered on the first ring. Mia closed her eyes, swallowing hard. If you want him to live, meet me at the clinic tonight. After hours." There was a pause then. "I'll be there in 20 minutes." The clinic was eerily quiet as Mia unlocked the back door, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. She moved quickly, turning on only the essential lights in the surgical suite. Every shadow made her jump, expecting security or worse, Sarah, to appear. The soft purr of an engine drew her attention. Through the window, she watched Leonard's black SUV slide into the empty parking lot like a phantom. He emerged carrying a sleek metal case, his expensive coat out of place in the deserted lot. Mia met him at the door, quickly ushering him inside. He set the case down carefully, opening it to reveal pristine surgical equipment. Clearly he'd come prepared. His eyes fixed on the trembling puppy in its carrier, and something in his stern expression cracked. "Let's save what's left of her." The words hung heavy in the air, and Mia suddenly understood. In his mind, this wasn't just about saving a puppy. It was about holding on to the last connection to Grace, his lost daughter. The harsh fluorescent lights cast stark shadows across the operating room as Mia methodically scrubbed her hands and arms. Her movements were precise despite her exhaustion, but she couldn't stop the slight tremor in her fingers. The weight of what she was about to do, performing unauthorized surgery after hours, pressed down on her shoulders like a physical burden. Leonard Anders stood near the operating table, his tailored suit jacket discarded and crisp white shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His stance was rigid, arms crossed over his chest as he watched her every move. She'd suggested he wait outside, but his response had been a simple, firm no. His presence should have made her more nervous, but there was something oddly reassuring about his unwavering focus. It reminded her of the solid presence of her instructors during vet school surgeries. "The anesthesia will take a few minutes to take effect," Mia explained, keeping her voice professional as she prepared her instruments. The tiny puppy looked even smaller on the steel table, its breath shallow but steady under the oxygen mask. Leonard nodded once, saying nothing. His eyes never left the operating table. As Mia began the delicate work of cleaning the infected tissue, the only sounds were the steady beep of the heart monitor and the soft clink of surgical tools. Her world narrowed to the task at hand, carefully removing damaged tissue, flushing the wound, preparing for the orthopedic repair. Then the steady beeping turned into a single, sustained tone. "Flatline!" Mia snapped, already moving. "I need epinephrine, top drawer of the crash cart, red label." Before she could finish, Leonard was already there, pulling open the drawer with surprising confidence. He grabbed the correct vial and syringe, passing them to her without hesitation. Mia's eyes widened briefly at his efficiency, but there was no time to question it. She administered the injection with practiced precision, holding her breath as she waited for response. The silence stretched for 3 eternal seconds before the monitor picked up a heartbeat again. Mia released her breath slowly, aware of Leonard doing the same beside her. "How did you know?" she started to ask. "Continue the surgery, doctor." "Hail," he interrupted quietly. His face was pale, but his voice remained steady. Mia returned her focus to the operation, carefully placing tiny orthopedic screws to stabilize the fractured leg. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and she blinked it away, not daring to move her hands to wipe it. The silence stretched again, broken only by the now steady beep of the monitor. Then Leonard spoke, his voice so soft she almost missed it. "Grace named Daisy after her favorite flower." His words seemed to come from far away, as if he was lost in memory. Said it was proof life grows back, no matter what. For the first time since she'd met him, his voice cracked on the words. Mia didn't look up, giving him the privacy to have this moment while her hands remained steady at their work. The sky was beginning to lighten outside the windows by the time Mia placed the last suture. The puppy was stable, heavily bandaged but breathing steadily under sedation. She stepped back from the table, suddenly aware of how her legs trembled with fatigue. She sank into a nearby chair, watching as Leonard approached the operating table. He studied the tiny patient with an unreadable expression. then reached into his coat pocket. An envelope appeared in his hand, which he placed on the counter without a word. Mia didn't even need to look to know what it contained. She pushed herself up, sliding the envelope back toward him. "If this is money, keep it. I'm not doing this for you." Leonard turned to face her fully. In the harsh overhead light, the lines of grief on his face seemed deeper than ever. He studied her for a long moment, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. "Neither am I," he said quietly. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the operating room. The first rays of dawn streamed through the windows, painting golden streaks across the floor where he had stood. Morning sunlight painted harsh stripes across Mia's face as she carefully maneuvered her car into her apartment's parking spot. Her eyes burned with exhaustion, and her scrubs still carried the sharp smell of antiseptic. In her passenger seat, the puppy lay cushioned in a makeshift nest of blankets, tiny chest rising and falling in sedated sleep. "Almost there, buddy," she whispered, gathering her supplies with trembling hands. The trek up 3 flights of stairs felt endless, but finally she was home. Mia placed the puppy gently in its crate, adjusting the heating pad and IV line with careful precision. "We made it, little one." Her voice was hoarse from fatigue. She slumped against the wall, allowing herself one moment of relief. Her phone buzzed violently in her pocket, shattering the peace. 6 missed calls and a barrage of texts from her clinic manager lit up the screen. The last message made her stomach drop. "Security footage shows you in the clinic at 2 a.m. Explain, now!" Mia's fingers shook as she typed out a response, trying to keep her story straight. "Emergency call from a regular client. Their dog was choking. Didn't want to wake anyone." The reply came instantly. "No record of any emergency call, no client paperwork. Try again." More messages flooded in, each more demanding than the last. Terms like protocol violation and board review jumped out at her. The threat to her license hung unspoken but clear. Her phone chirped with a different tone. Leonard's now familiar number. "Updates." "Now." "Not now," Mia muttered, silencing her phone. Anger bubbled up through her exhaustion. She'd saved the puppy's life, risked everything, and now her whole career was unraveling. The unfairness of it all made her want to scream. A sharp knock at her door made her jump. Her heart raced until she saw the delivery uniform through the peephole. The young courier handed her a large box marked Medical Supplies, Priority Delivery. Inside, she found top-grade veterinary equipment, monitoring devices, surgical supplies, medications, items she'd only seen in high-end clinics. A small note lay on top, the handwriting precise and angular. "For him, not for you." No signature needed. Mia crumpled the note, torn between gratitude and frustration at Leonard's presumption. Her phone rang again. Ethan this time. She almost ignored it, but guilt made her answer. "Sis, I'm in trouble." His voice was tight with panic. "I need cash. Today." "Ethan, I can't. Don't give me that. I know you've got money stashed away. If you don't help, I'll come down to your fancy clinic. Make a scene. How would your boss like that?" The threat hit like a physical blow. "Please don't," she whispered. "Then help me." The line went dead. Mia pressed her palms against her eyes, fighting back tears of frustration. Every choice seemed to lead to disaster. Her career, her brother, this secret surgery, it was all spinning out of control. A soft whimper drew her attention. The puppy's eyes were open, focusing on her for the first time since the surgery. Its tiny pink tongue darted out, weakly licking her finger when she reached into the crate. The simple gesture of trust made her throat tight with emotion and fear. She'd risked everything for this fragile life. What would it cost her in the end? Darkness crept in as evening fell. Mia sat on her couch, watching the puppy's crate, her mind racing through scenarios, each worse than the last. The soft rhythm of the puppy's breathing was the only sound in her apartment, until 3 sharp knocks broke the silence. Her heart jumped as she peered through the peephole. Leonard Anders stood in her hallway, impeccably dressed despite the late hour, holding a small leather bag. His expression was set in hard lines that said he was done asking for permission. Mia's hand hesitated on the doorknob. After a moment, she opened it. Leonard's eyes met hers with steel determination. "You've proven you can keep him alive," he said without preamble. "Now prove you can keep a secret." Mia stepped back from her doorway, letting Leonard Anders enter her small apartment. His polished shoes clicked against the worn linoleum as he took in the space, the second-hand furniture, the stack of medical textbooks, the dishes drying by the sink. His eyes swept across everything with the precision of someone used to cataloging details, mentally inventorying each item as if assessing its value. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through her thin curtains, highlighting the dust particles dancing in the air. A soft whimper drew his attention instantly. The puppy stirred in its crate, tiny paws twitching in sleep. For just a moment, Leonard's stern expression cracked. Something flickered in his eyes, pain, maybe longing, before his face settled back into its usual mask of cool detachment. His fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on the handle of his leather bag. "Your setup is adequate," he said, but the word carried judgment, hanging in the air between them like an unspoken criticism. He set his leather bag on her coffee table, unzipping it with deliberate care, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet apartment. "I'm doing the best I can," Mia replied, crossing her arms. The defensive note in her voice surprised even her. She glanced around at her modest home, suddenly seeing it through his eyes, the water stain in the corner of the ceiling, the fraying edge of the rug, the mismatched curtains she'd found at a thrift store. Leonard pulled out a sleek, portable oxygen concentrator, far more advanced than anything she'd seen outside specialty hospitals. The device gleamed under the light, all chrome and curves. Next came bottles of high-grade pain medication, the kind that cost more than her monthly rent, neatly labeled and arranged in a padded case. "You'll need these if you want him alive," he stated flatly, arranging the items with military precision. His long fingers moved with practiced efficiency, setting each item exactly where he wanted it, turning labels to face forward. The presumption in his tone sparked something in Mia. Heat rose to her cheeks as she watched this stranger reorganize her space. "You can't just walk into my life with demands and expensive equipment," she snapped. "I'm not one of your employees. This is my home, not your corporate office." Leonard turned to face her, his height making him tower in the small room. His shadow stretched across her floor like a physical extension of his authority. "You invited me the moment you dialed my number, Doctor. Hail. Or did you think finding that collar was a coincidence? Nothing in my world happens by chance." Mia stepped closer to the crate, protectively. The puppy had settled again, its tiny chest rising and falling in uneven breaths. "Why does this puppy matter so much? It's been 8 years since—" She caught herself, but Leonard's jaw had already tightened at the unspoken reference to Grace. The room seemed to grow colder, as if the very mention of his daughter had dropped the temperature. He was quiet for so long that Mia thought he wouldn't answer. The ticking of her wall clock counted out the seconds of silence. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its sharp edge, replaced by something raw and unfamiliar. "Daisy saved Grace before I even knew she needed saving," he said, looking past Mia as if seeing something else entirely. His gaze fixed on a point beyond her walls, beyond the present moment. "My daughter was fighting depression. I threw money at therapists, medications, specialists, but it was that dog that got her through the worst days. When Grace couldn't get out of bed, Daisy would lie there with her. When she couldn't face people, that dog gave her a reason to go outside." He ran a hand over his face, suddenly looking older. The harsh lines around his mouth deepened, and for the first time, Mia noticed the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. "After the accident, I swore I'd never have another pet. Couldn't bear it. The emptiness in the house was suffocating. But when Daisy had puppies—" His voice caught, a momentary crack in his perfect control. I couldn't destroy that last piece of her. I couldn't fail Grace again. It's not about a dog, Doctor. Hale, he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. It's about finishing what I failed at. It's about keeping a promise to someone who can no longer hear me make it. Mia felt her anger softening despite herself. She recognized the weight of guilt in his words. It was the same load she carried about Ethan. The same heaviness that settled in her chest every time her brother called for money, every time she found herself cleaning up another of his messes. Leonard straightened his jacket, composure returning like a shield being raised. The vulnerable man disappeared behind the businessman's facade. You'll text updates daily. No more clinic visits. The puppy stays here until it's stable. I'll have additional supplies delivered tomorrow morning. And my license? Mia asked, thinking of her manager's threats. Her fingers twisted nervously in the hem of her shirt as she waited for his answer. Will remain intact, Leonard assured her. I'll see to it personally. The confidence in his voice left no room for doubt. Whatever power he wielded, he was clearly accustomed to using it to get his way. He turned to leave but paused at the door. His driver appeared silently, materializing from the hallway like a shadow, handing him something small and white. Leonard held it out to Mia, a thick business card, cream-colored and expensive. The weight of it suggested cotton fiber, not ordinary paper. An address was embossed in elegant script. Nothing else. No phone number, no email, no company name to indicate its purpose. For when you're ready, Leonard said simply, pressing it into her palm. His fingers were surprisingly warm against her skin, the brief contact somehow more personal than their entire conversation had been. Before she could ask what that meant, he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him with quiet finality. His black SUV pulled away smoothly from the curb, leaving Mia standing in her doorway, the card cool against her skin, wondering, ready for what? The question hung in the air as she closed the door, turning back to face the puppy and the expensive equipment that had so suddenly transformed her small apartment into something else entirely. 2 nights after Leonard's visit, Mia sat cross-legged on her apartment floor, her back against the couch. A single lamp cast a warm glow across the room, barely reaching the corners. In her lap, she held a small syringe filled with liquid nutrition. The puppy, nestled in a soft blanket beside her, lifted its tiny head with newfound strength. That's it, little fighter, Mia whispered, watching as the pup actually swallowed on its own for the first time since the surgery. Relief washed over her tired features. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but a spark of hope brightened them as the puppy took another successful swallow. Her phone buzzed suddenly on the coffee table, screen lighting up with an unknown number. Mia's hand hesitated over it before answering. Hello. You've been speaking with Leonard Anders, a clipped voice stated coldly. That's a mistake. The line went dead with a sharp click. Mia's breath caught in her throat. Goosebumps prickled along her arms as she jumped up, nearly knocking over the lamp. She rushed to the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to peek outside. Through the glass, she spotted a dark sedan idling across the street, its engine running, headlights off. She blinked, and the car vanished into the night like a phantom. Her hands shook as she stepped back from the window. The puppy whimpered softly, picking up on her anxiety. She should tell Leonard, shouldn't she? Her finger hovered over his contact information, but she hesitated. Getting him more involved would only entangle her deeper in whatever dangerous game was being played. The next day at the clinic dragged with nervous energy. Mia jumped at every unexpected noise, her nerves frayed. Just before lunch, her manager called her into the office, expression grim. The state board is sending an auditor, she announced. 3 weeks from now, they'll be doing a complete review of our records and protocols. The words hit Mia like ice water. Missing medications, unauthorized surgery, borrowed equipment. Each violation threatened not just her job, but her entire career. She managed to nod professionally, but panic clawed at her chest as she left the office. That evening, she had just finished checking the puppy's vitals when heavy knocking rattled her apartment door. Through the peephole, she saw Ethan, disheveled, agitated, bouncing on his heels like he couldn't keep still. "Come on, Mia, open up," he called out, too loud for the late hour. "I know you're in there." She cracked the door, keeping the chain on. "Ethan, it's late. What do you want?" He pushed against the door, trying to see inside. "Just let me in. We need to talk." Against her better judgment, Mia unchained the door. Ethan burst in, eyes darting around the apartment until they landed on the medical supplies near the puppy's crate. His expression shifted calculatingly. "Look at all this," he said, moving towards the supplies. "High-grade stuff. You holding out on me, sis?" "Don't," Mia warned, stepping between him and the medications. "Those aren't mine to give." Ethan's face darkened. "But they're yours to steal for some mutt?" He reached for one of the bottles. "I could make good money with—" "Get out!" Mia shoved him back towards the door, adrenaline giving her strength. "Now." "Fine!" Ethan spat, stumbling backward. "Care more about a damn dog than your own brother. Real nice, Mia." She slammed the door, throwing the deadbolt and chain. Her heart hammered against her ribs as his footsteps retreated down the hallway. With trembling fingers, Mia typed out the evening update to Leonard about the puppy's progress. Just as she hit send, another message popped up from the unknown number. "This isn't about a dog. Walk away or you'll regret it." Rain lashed against the window as Mia stared at her phone, face drained of color, the threat hanging in the darkness like a blade. The morning fog hung low over the city streets, turning lampposts into ghostly sentinels. Mia pulled her jacket tighter as she stepped out of her apartment building, grocery list clutched in her hand. She stopped short at the sight of the familiar black SUV idling at the curb, its engine purring quietly in the mist. Her heart skipped as the rear window rolled down smoothly, revealing Leonard Anders' face, impassive as stone. "Get in," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "We need to talk." Mia glanced back at her building, thinking of the puppy safely nestled in its crate upstairs. After a moment's hesitation, she opened the car door and slid into the leather seat beside him. The interior smelled of expensive cologne and something else. Fear, maybe. Leonard reached into his briefcase and withdrew a thick manila folder. Without a word, he began spreading its contents across the seat between them. Newspaper clippings yellowed with age, glossy photographs of a smiling teenage girl with long dark hair, and, Mia's breath caught, surveillance photos of her leaving the clinic late at night, the puppy-sized bulge visible in her tote bag. "You're not careful," Leonard said, his finger tapping one of the recent photos. "People are watching both of us." "Who?" Mia demanded, anger flaring through her unease. "Who's taking pictures of me?" Leonard's jaw tightened as he gathered the photos back into the folder. Anders Industries still has enemies, vultures circling, waiting for signs of weakness. He paused, eyes fixed straight ahead. "My disappearance from public life made them hungry. Now they think they smell blood in the water. What does that have to do with the puppy? They'll use anything as leverage, proof I'm resurfacing, proof I'm vulnerable." His knuckles whitened on the folder. "They've been waiting 8 years for a crack in the wall." The SUV pulled away from the curb, gliding through the foggy streets. Mia watched Leonard's profile, noting how the morning light deepened the lines of grief around his mouth. After several minutes of tense silence, he spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was supposed to go with her that weekend, to the lake house." His words came slowly, as if each one caused him physical pain. "But there was a merger deal, time-sensitive. I cancelled our trip, told her to go ahead without me." He drew a shaky breath. She was alone on that mountain road when the accident happened. Mia saw it then, the raw wound beneath his carefully maintained armor, still bleeding after 8 years. Before she could respond, the SUV turned through an elaborate iron gate, following a winding driveway through immaculately maintained grounds. The estate that emerged from the fog seemed to exist in another world, sprawling stone and glass, surrounded by formal gardens now shrouded in mist. Leonard led her inside, through halls that echoed with their footsteps. They stopped at a heavy wooden door, which he unlocked with visible reluctance. "I need you to understand something," he said, pushing it open. The private wing beyond was frozen in time. Grace's belongings filled the space exactly as she'd left them. Textbooks on the desk, a jacket draped over a chair, framed photos everywhere. But what dominated the room was the portrait. Grace seated in a garden, sunshine in her hair, with Daisy's head resting contentedly in her lap. Both of them looked impossibly happy, unknowing of what lay ahead. Mia stood transfixed, understanding washing over her like a wave. The puppy wasn't just a pet, or even a simple connection to the past. It was the last living piece of a family shattered by loss, a tiny heartbeat in a house that had stopped living 8 years ago. As they turned to leave the memory-soaked room, Leonard paused in the doorway. His voice was quiet, but carried the weight of every sleepless night since Grace's death. "If you think this is about money," he said, "you don't understand loss." Mia looked back one last time at Grace's smiling face in the portrait, feeling her resolve harden like steel in her chest. She would protect this puppy, this final fragment of Grace's light, even if it cost her everything. The evening light filtered softly through Mia's apartment windows, casting long shadows across the floor. She sat cross-legged on her living room carpet, watching with barely contained joy as the puppy took its first tentative steps. Its tiny paws wobbled uncertainly on the plush rug, but its tail wagged with determination. "That's it, little one," Mia encouraged softly, holding her hands out. "You've got this." The puppy's bandaged leg still dragged slightly, but its progress was remarkable. Just days ago, it had been fighting for life on her operating table. Now here it was, stumbling toward her with unexpected spirit. Each step brought a fresh wave of emotion to Mia's throat. A harsh knock shattered the peaceful moment. "Mia, open up!" Ethan's voice carried through the door, slurred and desperate. The puppy startled, retreating to its crate as Mia's stomach dropped. She peered through the peephole to see her brother swaying slightly, his eyes bloodshot and wild. When she cracked the door, keeping the security chain in place, Ethan immediately thrust his hand through the gap. "I need money, now! Ethan, we talked about this. I can't keep— Cut the big sister act!" He snapped. "You either help me, or the clinic board finds out about your little midnight surgery session." Mia's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" Ethan's laugh was bitter as he pulled out his phone. "Pretty dog you've got there, sis." He turned the screen toward her, showing a clear photo of the puppy in its crate. "Bet someone would pay a fortune for it, especially since it's not supposed to exist." "You've been spying on me?" Fury and fear collided in Mia's chest. "Just keeping tabs on my favorite sister." His smile turned ugly. "So what's it worth to you?" Something snapped inside Mia. She shoved the door open, knocking Ethan off balance, and slapped the phone from his hand. It clattered across the hallway floor. "Get out!" she screamed, shoving him backward. "Stay away from me and stay away from that puppy!" Ethan stumbled, his face twisting with rage. "You'll regret this." "Try me." Mia slammed the door, engaging every lock with trembling hands. She slid down against the wall, heart hammering in her chest. The puppy whimpered from its crate, picking up on her distress. Before she could catch her breath, her phone buzzed. Leonard's name flashed on the screen. "Someone just approached my gate." Leonard's voice was arctic cold when she answered. "Asked interesting questions about you and a certain veterinarian breaking protocol." Mia closed her eyes. "Leonard, Fix this, Mia." Each word fell like an icicle. "Or I will." The line went dead. Mia's hands shook as she typed out a desperate text to Ethan. "Please stay away. I'll transfer what I can tomorrow. Just don't do anything stupid." Minutes ticked by with no response. The silence felt like a noose tightening. Mia crawled over to the puppy's crate, opening the door gently. It nuzzled her hand, innocent and trusting. Tears welled in her eyes. "You're the only good thing I've got left," she whispered, stroking its soft fur. "Hang on for me." Eventually, exhaustion won out. Mia curled up on her couch, unable to face her bedroom. The puppy dozed in its crate nearby, its gentle breathing the only sound in the apartment. Just as her eyes grew heavy, headlights swept across her ceiling. Through half-closed lids, she glimpsed a dark figure standing by the curb, watching her window. The puppy stirred in its crate, sensing what Mia was too tired to fully register. A feeble bark pierced the midnight silence, jolting Mia from her restless sleep on the couch. Her heart leapt into her throat as she sat up, disoriented. The puppy, normally so quiet, let out another weak yip from its crate, ears pricked toward the window. Mia crept to the glass, pulling back the curtain just enough to peek outside. A dark sedan idled across the street, its engine a low purr in the stillness. As she watched, the headlights clicked off, plunging the street into darkness. Her breath caught. A sudden flash, bright and quick like a camera, cut through the night. The car's engine revved, and it peeled away from the curb, tires squealing against asphalt. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, screen lighting up with an unknown number. The message made her blood run cold. "You've had your chance. Now we take what's ours." "No, no, no," Mia whispered, hands trembling as she rushed to the puppy's crate. She scooped up the tiny creature, cradling it against her chest. Its heart fluttered like a trapped bird beneath her palm. She grabbed her largest tote bag, stuffing it with puppy essentials, medications, blankets, syringes, the precious oxygen concentrator. Her fingers fumbled with her phone as she hit Leonard's number. He answered instantly. "What's wrong?" "Whoever's watching us just made their move," she blurted, voice shaking. "They were outside my apartment. They took pictures. They sent a message." "Stay put," Leonard cut in, his tone sharp with authority. "Lock the door. I'm coming now." Mia double-checked every lock, then pressed her back against the wall beside the door, the puppy trembling in her arms. Minutes crawled by like hours. Sudden tires screeched outside. Mia's heart stopped. She inched toward the peephole, peering out into the dimly lit hallway. Two men in dark hoodies approached her door with purposeful strides. One reached into his pocket. Blinding headlights flooded the hallway window. The men spun around as Leonard's black SUV jumped the curb onto the sidewalk. Car doors slammed, and figures in tactical gear emerged, moving with military precision. The hooded men bolted, disappearing down the stairwell with Leonard's security team in pursuit. Footsteps thundered up to her door. "Mia, open up!" Leonard's voice commanded. She fumbled with the locks, and Leonard burst in, face tight with barely contained rage. But his fury wasn't directed at the attackers. "I told you this wasn't just about a dog," he shouted, making the puppy flinch in Mia's arms. His voice cracked with an emotion she hadn't heard before, raw fear. "What's really going on?" Mia demanded. Leonard ran a hand through his silver hair, pacing back and forth across Mia's small living room like a caged predator. The floorboards creaked beneath his expensive shoes as he moved. "Anders Industries is vulnerable right now. A consortium of international rivals is positioning for a hostile takeover. 8 years of my absence from public life left dangerous openings in the corporate structure." He stopped abruptly, his shoulders tense beneath his tailored jacket, fixing her with an intense stare that made her stomach tighten. "But even rumors of my re-emergence, even through whispers about this puppy's connection to me, could dramatically sway investor confidence. There are billions in play, Mia. Billions." "The puppy isn't leverage," Mia realized aloud, her throat going dry as the pieces clicked into place. She cradled the small creature closer, feeling its warmth against her chest. "It's bait, to draw you out into the open where they can target you. To prove I still have." Leonard's voice faltered, a crack in his carefully constructed armor. His eyes flicked momentarily to the puppy, then away. "Something to lose. Someone to care about. Any weakness they can exploit." Another car crawled past outside the apartment building, its headlights sweeping across the windows like searchlights, casting long, dancing shadows across the worn carpet. Leonard tensed, his hand instinctively moving toward his inside pocket. His decision was instant, the businessman in him taking control. "You're coming with me, both of you, now." His tone left no room for discussion. "But I can't just abandon everything," Mia protested, glancing around at her humble apartment. "My job, There's no choice," Leonard snapped, already gathering her bag from the hook by the door and shoving in essentials from the counter. "My security team will handle the rest of your belongings tomorrow. They'll pack everything properly. Right now, we move before they come back with reinforcements." Mia looked around her small apartment, her safe haven for 3 years, the first place she'd managed to afford on her own, now tainted with threat and violation, and clutched the puppy closer to her chest. The little creature whimpered softly, sensing her distress. With a deep breath, she nodded and followed Leonard into the night. The SUV's engine roared as they entered the armored interior. The leather seats felt cool, the air smelling of cologne and newness. Leonard barked coordinates into a radio as they sped away, leaving Mia's old life behind. City lights blurred past tinted windows as they headed toward the Anders estate. Mia cradled the puppy, feeling its heartbeat calm against hers. "You're safe," she whispered into its fur. "I promise I won't let anything happen to you." She glanced at Leonard's profile, harsh in the passing streetlights. His knuckles whitened on the armrest, jaw clenched, eyes constantly scanning. In the dashboard glow, strain lined his mouth. Nothing felt safe anymore. Her world had crumbled overnight. The Anders estate loomed against the lightening sky, its stone facade catching the first hints of dawn. The iron gates groaned shut behind the SUV, their heavy clang echoing across manicured grounds. Inside, security personnel moved with practiced efficiency, activating systems and securing the perimeter. Leonard guided Mia through the mansion's shadowed corridors, his footsteps heavy with purpose. The puppy trembled in her arms, its tiny body exhausted from the night's chaos. They entered the private wing, the shrine to Grace's memory that had struck Mia so deeply before. Now, in the pale morning light, it felt less like a museum and more like an open wound. "You can't keep running from answers," Mia said quietly, settling the puppy on a plush blanket. "What really happened with Grace?" Leonard stood by the window, his shoulders rigid. For a long moment, he remained silent, staring out at the garden where spring bulbs pushed through thawing earth. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of years of unspoken pain. "She wanted me to go on a road trip," he said. "Just the two of us. No phones, no business calls. She'd planned it for months." His fingers pressed against the glass. "I refused. Said I had important meetings, deals that couldn't wait." A bitter laugh escaped him. Deals, as if any of it mattered. He turned, gesturing at the preserved room around them. "Everything I've built since then, it's ashes without her. This empire, the money, the power, it's all meaningless. I couldn't save her then. I can't save anything now." Leonard moved to a small desk, its surface pristine except for a thin layer of dust. With trembling hands, he pulled open a sealed drawer and withdrew a small envelope, yellowed with age. Mia's breath caught as she saw the simple word written on the front. "Dad." "I've never—" Leonard's voice cracked. "I couldn't." His fingers shook as he broke the seal. The paper inside was creased, the handwriting delicate but sure. Grace's final words to her father filled the page. "If you're reading this, it means I couldn't say it enough. Don't shut yourself away. Find something to love when I'm gone. Promise me you will." Leonard's composure shattered. His shoulders heaved as 8 years of carefully constructed walls crumbled. Mia gently lifted the puppy and placed it in his lap. The tiny creature stretched out a paw, touching the letter as if guided by some unseen hand. Tears fell freely down Leonard's face as he cradled both the puppy and his daughter's last request. "You kept that promise," Mia said softly, "without even knowing. Love found you, through her dog." Leonard's hand found hers, gripping it with desperate gratitude. No words were needed. The trust between them spoke volumes. Weeks passed, and spring painted the estate in vibrant colors. The gardens burst with new life as Mia and Leonard sat on a stone bench, watching the puppy explore the grass with growing confidence. Its leg had healed well, leaving only a slight limp that did nothing to dampen its spirit. Near the main gates, workers mounted a freshly painted sign. The elegant lettering caught the morning light. The Grace Foundation, for animals and the people who need them. Leonard turned to Mia, his eyes clear and determined. "You're leading it. That's not a request." Tears welled in Mia's eyes, not from obligation, but from possibility. For the first time since she could remember, she saw a future bigger than mere survival. A flash of movement caught their attention. The puppy bounded toward them, something clutched gently in its mouth, a single daisy plucked from the garden. Leonard took the flower with reverent care, holding it like a sacred thing. In its simple petals, he saw his daughter's smile, a promise kept, and perhaps, finally, forgiveness. I believe stories like this find us for a reason. If this one touched you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day, and tomorrow's might be the one your heart's been waiting for. A 12-arm, the smallest puppy ever seen, was about to be put down, then Vet read its collar.